Bienvenidos, Hushamdeed, and welcome to this supplemental video tutorial on the Cisco Networking Academy Introduction to Python course, lab number 2.1.5.2. In this lab, we're going to be taking a look at the semantics around comments. We're going to discuss putting inline comments. We're also going to touch on the docstring convention. So while it might seem silly that we have a video and a lab in the curriculum that talks about comments, it becomes very, very important as to how we're going to structure those comments and what those comments should look like. And we're also going to go back to PEP 8, that Python enhancement proposal, and we're going to see what the recommendations are for comments there, because there are some really good recommendations and best practices around what we should be doing when it comes to comments. Now, here is lab 2.1.5.2, and as you can see right off the bat, we've got lowercase letters beginning sentences. We've got a hash sign here and then a space, but we don't have a space up here. We've got quotes down here. So our comments are kind of just all over the place. So the scenario here is we've got this code. We need to fix the code, but in addition to that, we need to properly comment the code. And on the same hand, we need to remove comments where things are self-commenting. And again, you can see here, and give self-commenting names to variables. It's sometimes simply much better to leave information in the code. And so something like this, where we say print hours, do we need a comment that's saying we're printing the number of hours? Well, no, because the code is pretty clear that we're printing the number of hours. And again, the same thing with our variable name here. So again, we've got a lot of work that we can do to clean this code up. So the first thing I want to do before we jump into the integrated development learning environment is, again, let's come back to PEP 8. We've seen that PEP 8 has been very valuable to us in terms of indentations, tabs and spaces, and when we've looked at variable names. For function names, it's going to become just as important, but if I was to do a search right now and we were to look up comments, you can see that we have block comments, inline comments, doc string or documentation string comments. So let's cruise down here and take a look. Now, inline comments, it's recommended that we use these sparingly, and they give us an explanation and an example as to what an inline comment might look like. But again, would this really be necessary? And that's what they're saying. It's almost distracting here because we can clearly see by looking at the code that we're trying to increment the value for X. But this comment here may be more appropriate. Again, in the scenario right here, an inline comment like that is redundant. We already know that we're incrementing X there. However, down here, compensate for border, it might not be clear based off those variable names that we are compensating for the border. Now, this comment section also talks about using two spaces after a sentence ending period in multi-sentence comments, except after the final sentence. It even refers to a book by Strunk and White, and it's basically on style. And then if we come down a little further, you can see there's information here on documentation strings, or as they're commonly referred to, just simply doc strings. Now, these are immortalized in PEP number 257, and when we get into functions and creating our own modules, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about doc strings and how those provide value to users of our module or users of our functions, and even for us documenting our own work. So again, this is a very good read, this section right here on comments. It's going to give you a really good idea as to how you should approach things. And you can see right here, the first word should be capitalized when we're using complete sentences. So Let's go ahead. Let's step over to the integrated development learning environment. I've cut and pasted things over here. It's going to give us a little more room to work with. And I'm also going to be pulling in a comment section to give you an example of what you might want to do if you start to write functions and maybe, I'm sorry, not functions, but modules. And maybe you're putting code out on GitHub, one of the communities of practice that exist where you can share and exchange your code and ideas with other interested programmers. So the very first thing that we see up here, it says this program computes the number of seconds in a given number of hours. This program has been written 2 days ago. Well, these comments right here don't actually help us. You can see that the letters are lowercase. We probably should have uppercase letters here, right? And why not go ahead, drop a period in here? But again, this comment here, this program has been written 2 days ago. Do we want to do that, or do we want to say something like, you know, date of last update, or last update date, or last change date, right? And so I've created, and I shared this with the course, I created sort of a template that you might want to grab and use. And again, I didn't go all the way out because I was quickly putting this together. But if I was to grab this, this even has the GNU General Public License Statement that you could include in the modules that you're creating. And if you wanted to go ahead and share those modules under that GNU Public Licensing Scheme, you could do that. And so let's go ahead, let's get rid of those 2 lines right there. Right, we've got our licensing information here. And again, this dash H that I have, these are just general comments. So change log, right? Well, if it was changed 2 days ago, today's the 17th of March, maybe we put in here on 17th of April. If I say APR, 17 April 2020, and we'll say we added a new print function to clarify purpose of program. Again, at the top, I've got the program name up here, and let's go ahead. We'll make that a little bit more accurate. And so I'm just simply calling this 2.1.5. Is it .2? I can't remember. Let's come back over here. Yeah, 2.1.5.2, right? We've got a version. I've got the author information, maybe how you contact me, the date that it was created, some parameters. I've got the changelog entry here. And again, beginning each of the lines, and we'll pull this back here to make it a little cleaner, beginning each of the lines with a single pound followed by an additional pound. Now, I've always been a huge proponent of this, and just something that I've always done when I've coded is I always start off with 2 pound signs and a blank line so that there's some separation from the top of the screen. Again, sometimes this is going to come down to personal preference and what you like most, or what you feel is the best way to approach things. So let's come down to the code here. What else? What can we fix here? Well, when we look at this, we see that we've got this comment telling us it's the number of hours. How about I do this? How about we get rid of the inline comment, and I come down here and I say number of hours, right? Because that is self-commenting code. Because when we look at that, I can clearly see that I'm talking about 2 hours, that is the number of hours. Now, seconds equal 3,600. It might not be obvious by looking at that you know right off the top of your head that that is the number of seconds in 1 hour. So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. And I think the PEP said we wanted a couple spaces there, and then the number of seconds in 1 hour. So 3,600. Now, we come down here to a print statement, and it says printing the number of hours. Well, that should be pretty obvious based off of not only the variable name, but the variable name in conjunction with the print statement we already have. So I'll say number underscore of underscore hours. And so now it becomes obvious we're printing the number of hours. I don't need that comment there. Now, the print line below, you can see here that the code has been commented out, right? And we've got the comment line here. So that means that code's not going to be executed. In fact, let's hit F5 and let's do a quick run through here and see what we've got. What we should see, and the only code that should execute, is it should print hours and then the number of hours. And here we go. Hours 2. So we know that we have 2 hours. Now, it looks like we want to print the number of seconds. In other words, why would we have created this variable assigning that value to it unless we were going to use that in our program? So let's come down here. Let's get rid of the comment. Let's bring this code into action in our script here. Now, seconds in hours. So we could leave this. Maybe we could make that so you can see it says printing the number of seconds in a given number of hours. And again, do we need that? We really don't if we can come up with self-commenting code. So it says seconds in hours. And so let's do this. So we could say the number of seconds in, and I'm going to come outside here, and now let's put in number underscore of, or I'm sorry, the number of seconds in, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, that's what I want here. Number of hours, and then I'll put another comma, the number of seconds in, and then it's going to give us the hours, oops, sorry, H-O-U-R-S, hours is, and we'll put that in there. Now, remember, that didn't make much sense. So we'll put down number of hours, number of underscore hours, just double checking here. All right, so now this is a little more self-commenting. The number of seconds in, and then we're going to print out whatever value it is we have hard-coded in here, the integer value for hours, and then hours is, and then we're going to go ahead and print out the number of hours times 3,600. So let's take a look at the final comments down here. Or actually, before we do that, let's do F5 and let's see, do we get an error message? Do we get some kind of a syntax error? No, we don't. We see that the number of seconds in 2 hours, and actually we could clean this up even further. Let's pull that back and that back. And we don't want that colon there. It kind of didn't read right to me when I looked at it. Again, this may be personal preference, but here a little nicer, right? The number of seconds in 2 hours is 7,200. All right, so that looks good. We take a look at these last 2 comment lines, right? Now, you can see there was a comment in the lab where it said sometimes incorrect comments are worse than no comment at all. And this last comment would be one of those comments, because take a look here, the number of seconds in 3 hour. So it should be 3 hours plural, but it's not 3 hours. It's actually 2 that we're trying to calculate. So I'm just going to pull that line out completely. And here's a line that I always do, this little block of code at the end of all my work, or at the end of the file. I always put a double hash signs, and then end of file, so that I know where the end of the file is. So now let's deal with this final comment here before we wrap up Lab 2152. It says here we should also print goodbye, but a programmer didn't have time to write any code. So let's resolve that issue. Let's go ahead and add in the print statement that would be needed. And let me pull this back here. And I always like to leave one line between code and my comments, right? So if I was doing nothing but that, this is where I would end things. But we've got an additional line here, and so watch what happens. I'm going to say print, and I'll say thank you for using my program. Goodbye for now. And we'll wrap things up. We'll wrap things up. Let's get that single tick there. So thank you for using my program, and goodbye for now. And I always keep a space, right? I like to have the code sort of separated in logical chunks. So here we've got the variables that we're defining for the program, and then I've got my print statements using those variables as part of the input to the print function. So let's go ahead and check this one more time. We'll say F5, we'll run this, and what do we get? We get exactly what we wanted, right? We see the number of hours. The number of seconds in 2 hours is 7,200. And thank you for using my program goodbye for now. And I'm just curious, my own curiosity. In 24 hours, I think it's 86,400. I'm just thinking of like cron tab type things. And let's see, yeah, 86,400. Okay, there we go. So in a full 24-hour day, there are 86,400 seconds. All right, well, that is going to wrap up our coverage of Module 2.1.5.2. We took a look at how to clean things up, how to come up with better self-commenting variable names and code, and ended up with a much more contiguous set of code in our script, other than sort of broken comments that we'd had mixed capitalization, incomplete sentences, and then we had some comments that were just plain wrong. And we cleaned that up. We also took a look at PEP 8. Definitely take a look at PEP 8 and read through that to get a better feeling for some of the best practice guidelines when it comes to putting comments in your Python code. All right. Thanks so much for watching. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I hope to see you in the next video.